Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack the absolute heartbeat of economic demand. We've got a really brisk, fascinating 4-minute macroeconomics lesson ahead of us, and we're focusing on a concept that literally governs the financial life of every single person watching this: the Keynesian consumption function.
So let's start with a scenario we all know too well. Think about your smartphone for a second. Even when it's just sitting there on your desk, totally idle, the screen is dark, no apps are running, it's still burning power on standby, right? Well, humans are exactly the same way when it comes to spending. Economists actually call this autonomous consumption. See, even if your income suddenly drops to absolute zero, you still have to eat, right? You still need shelter. You've got to spend just to survive. Basically, your financial battery is always draining on standby.
Now, let's look at how the famous economist John Maynard Keynes translated that undeniable human reality into a formal academic theory. The Keynesian consumption function is defined as the functional relationship between desired consumption expenditure and income. Mathematically, it's expressed as C equals F of Y. Now, what does that actually mean in plain English? Basically, Keynes mathematically proved that our spending, our consumption, or that C, is fundamentally driven by and totally dependent upon our income, Y.
So the crucial point is how exactly this mathematical relationship works in practice. Because Keynes didn't just casually observe that we spend money when we make money. No, he identified a strict rule of three fundamental properties that govern exactly how we behave with our cash. And those are a direct relationship, a fractional increase, and a falling average propensity to consume, or APC. Let's break these down one by one to see how they actually impact your wallet.
The first property is highly intuitive. It's the direct relationship. Simply put, as your income, represented by Y, increases, your consumption, C, also increases. When your paycheck charges up, your spending naturally grows right alongside it. It's pretty straightforward. You make more, you spend more. It is really the most basic engine of macroeconomic demand.
But here is where human psychology makes things incredibly fascinating. The second property is the fractional increase. When your income rises, your consumption increases too, sure, but by a somewhat smaller amount than the new income you just got. And why is that? Well, because we naturally save a fraction for later. This brings us to a really vital macroeconomic concept, the marginal propensity to consume, or MPC. Notice that MPC is greater than 0, but strictly less than 1. This just means out of every single new dollar you earn, you're going to spend a fraction of it, and you'll save the rest.
The third and final property is the falling average propensity to consume, or APC. Now, while the MPC looks at what you do with your new income, the APC looks at your total overall income. And the economic rule here is that the overall proportion of your total income that gets devoted to consumption actually declines as your income gets larger. So essentially, the wealthier a person or even a whole society gets, the smaller the percentage of their total wealth they actually need to spend on basic consumption.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we put it all together into one really elegant equation, C equals A plus CY. Let's map our phone battery analogy right onto this math. You see that lowercase a? That is your autonomous consumption. That's your standby battery drain that happens even if your income is 0. And the lowercase c? That's your marginal propensity to consume, the exact fractional rate at which you spend any new income Y that happens to come in.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can visualize that exact equation right on a graph. Look closely at the red consumption line. Notice where it starts on the vertical axis on the left? It doesn't start at 0, right? It starts at A. That y-intercept is our autonomous consumption. Even with 0 income on the bottom axis, spending is still happening. Then, watch how the red line slopes upward. That slope is C, your MPC. It goes up as income goes up, but because you're saving a fraction of your money, it doesn't rise perfectly vertically.
Let's move along and see how this builds when we introduce a crucial reference point. Check out that 45-degree guideline cutting straight through the middle of the graph from the origin. On that specific 45-degree line, the distance on the horizontal income axis perfectly equals the distance on the vertical consumption axis. Basically, it's the exact break-even point where all of your income is consumed and your savings are exactly 0. Look at where our consumption curve intersects that 45-degree line at point G. That is the exact moment your income finally catches up to your standby drain and your spending habits. Below that point, you're actually dipping into savings to survive. But above that point, you are actively building wealth.
It's amazing how much of our everyday human behavior can be captured in a simple line graph, isn't it? Economics isn't just about abstract theories. It's about the very real choices we make every single day. So, to wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with a thought to make this intensely personal.
Think about your own finances and your own habits. When that next paycheck hits your bank account, how much of it is going to go straight to your standby drain, and how much will go to your savings? In other words, what will your personal MPC be with your very next paycheck? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.